Okay, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah, Nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah, amma ba'd. As usual, inshallah, we're going to make dua for Palestine and then we're going to start, inshallah, okay? اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصل على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصل على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت إنك تقضي بالحق ولا يقضى عليك اللهم انصر إخواننا في غزة اللهم انصر إخواننا المستضعفين في غزة اللهم كن لهم عونا ونصيرا اللهم كن لهم عونا ونصيرا ومؤيدا وظهيرا اللهم كن لهم ولا تكن عليهم فارحم حيهم وميتهم يا رب العالمين اللهم كن لهم ولا تكن عليهم فارحم حيهم وميتهم يا رب العالمين اللهم اغفر لهم وارحمهم وعافهم واعف عنهم وأكرم نزلهم وأوسع مدخلهم واغسلهم بالماء والثلج والبرد ونقهم من الذنوب والخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس اللهم عليك بأعدائك يا رب العالمين اللهم انصرنا عليهم يا رب العالمين اللهم مزقهم كل ممزق اللهم زلزل الأرض من تحت أقدامهم اللهم ألق الرعب في قلوبهم اللهم ألق الرعب في قلوبهم اللهم ألق الرعب في قلوبهم اللهم انصرنا عليهم يا رب العالمين وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Okay, so last time we talked about properties, خلاص? So we're going to continue that inshallah today, okay? So a quick review. Inshallah. Bismillah. So, I bring this all the time just to keep the idea in the head, right? What is a letter? What is a person learning Tajweed trying to do? I'm trying to define a letter conceptually. I'm trying to understand it in a conceptual way, so the person after me can actually understand what am I actually talking about, okay? So, the letter here, so we talked first of all at the places of articulation, right? So places of articulation is the physical instrument where I emit the letter. And then we talked about properties, right? So, that's the big thing that we have to get through. We finished place of articulation completely, and we started talking about essential properties. Then we talked about that the rest of Tajweed is this. And then we said that this one is a confusing one. And this is the first time today we're going to have an example of this part. A non-essential but changing property or attribute. But that's not important for now. But the idea is, always remember that this picture is the whole of Tajweed. I have a letter. I'm looking at the place of articulation. I'm looking at its properties. And we took examples of properties last time. So, what is an essential property? We said an essential property is a property that is part of the letter. So when we said sin and zay, right? We said sin and zay. And we said that once I remove one essential property, the letter stops existing. So when we say as, when I add vocal cords, when I add the property of vocal cords, what do? I say S. Now I add vocal cords. Z, S, S, S. So now, because I added the property and removed the properties of sin stopped existing and a new letter came about. So an essential property is a property that is part of what the letter actually is. And if that property goes, then the letter goes. And we said that properties have opposites and has no opposites. And the properties that have opposites, we said, it's either one pair or the other. So for example, if the letter, for example, it either emits a lot of air or does not emit a lot of air. Either the sound flows or the sound does not flow, right? If you're confused about what I'm saying, this is a review. We're going to stop and explain it, but I'm going through this a little quickly, right? Essential properties, we finished this one yesterday. we nearly finished this one, so we're gonna actually, I'm gonna a little bit start it over, but we kind of started this one, and inshallah, we're gonna be finishing this one if we're able to. Okay? So, we said, essential property that has opposites always answers a question. What was the first question we talked about? Does air flow? If air flows and we say yes, then it's a whisper. If air doesn't flow, then the letter is apparent. So if air flows yes, airflow no. That's why it's a pair. It's a property with opposites, okay? So what did we say with hams? We said that every letter has a lot of abundant air flows when you say the letter. And the most important part about it is the vocal cord opens and there's no vibration of it, right? So we said seen as well and zay. Another example is dhal and tha. Dhal, tha has a lot of air emission. So we say th. So we open the vocal cord and a lot of air gets emitted. The opposite is what? Is the dhal. So let's transition from tha to dhal. So what happened? The vocal cord started vibrating and a lot of air got restrained, right? Okay? And now, let's start from the beginning and let's talk about this part from the beginning. It's part of the review, but I want to restart it a little bit and let's ask the question. Okay, so we said properties are something added on the place of articulation. I articulate the letter, I move my lips and my tongue in a certain way, but that doesn't fully define the letter because the dhal and the tha are in the same spot. In the same spot, is in the same spot. I need something added. What is the second property we're going to talk about? The question is, does sound flow? Does sound flow? So, let's look at the qaf right here. Right? The qaf right here, it's completely blocked. So we say the flow completely closes. There's no sound that is getting emitted. So what happens is that the sound gets completely blocked, right? So what do we call the letters where the sound is completely blocked? We called it shiddah, or strength letters. What is shiddah letters? The blockage of the flow of sound because of the closing of the makhraj. The makhraj gets completely closed. So let's take examples. Qaf, right? Ab. The makhraj is completely closed and the sound is not emitted at all, right? So there's no sound that gets emitted. The question we asked here last time, and I don't know if people remember or people can come up with the answer. The kaf and the ta here are letters of where air flows. So the kaf and the ta are letters where air flows. But they're also here where sound does not flow. So the question was last time, how can a letter, the sound doesn't flow, but air flows? So kaf, when we said kaf, we said ak. Air flows with the kaf. That's what we said last time. Now, when I'm talking about does sound flow, kaf blocks ak, and the makhraj gets completely closed like the qaf. How does a letter have air flowing and sound not flowing? We talked about it last time, but who remembers? So let's think about it. So air does not flow, a sound does not flow, the makhraj is completely closed. But when I do it, I say k, air flows. So what actually happens is that I close the makhraj first, then I let the air come out. So letters of shiddah here, they need a way to come about. They need a way to get emitted. If I stop there, I'll not hear the sound. If I say ak, ad, ak, at, there's no sound that gets emitted, right? How do I get the sound to be emitted? The kaf and the ta, you do airflow, okay? So, strength letters, some of them have airflow and some of them have no airflow. So, how can I recite these letters? With the kaf and ta, it's simple. I close the makhraj, I say ak, and then I let the air flow. Ak, ak, ak. That's what I do. I close the makhraj, and then I let air flow. What about these other ones? Qalqala, right? So, kaf and ta, you block the letter first, then you release it. Qutb jad, you do qalqala. So we say aqo, aqo, aj, ad, right? We do qalqala. And we're going to learn qalqala very extensively, but I'm just mentioning here. We said also last class that hamza is very difficult to pronounce. So the Arabs found ways to run away from it. Because hamza is the only one you don't have qalqala, nor do you have airflow. So you just say sama. You don't have neither qalqala, you don't have sama. No, you have sama. You have neither. So you don't have airflow after it, nor do you have qalqala. So how do the Arabs deal with it? Sometimes Arabs run away from it. So they say yu'minun. People say yu'minun in some qira'at. Sama, they will say sama. Right? So they run away from it because of the difficulty of how to say the letter. Okay? In our qira'ah, we don't run away from it. We say all the hamazat. Except, not only this one, there's also another exception. What is this one? A'jami. How do we say it in our qira'ah? We say a. We don't say a, we say a. We eat it up. You eat it up a little bit. Why do people eat it up? Because it's very difficult to say the hamazat. So in the Arabs, they used to eat up these things. We're gonna have later, we're gonna have classes especially in these small weird nuances in our qira'ah, right? But the point here is to get the general understanding. When you have a letter that blocks the sound, when you have a letter that blocks the sound flow, you need a way to get to emit the sound because it just gets blocked. Sama, up, ad, ak. I need to hear the letter. So there's different ways of getting the letter out. You have one way is getting qalqala, the other way is airflow. Does that make sense? Okay? All of this is last it was a review, so I'm going a bit as quickly as possible, but I'm also trying to explain it as good as possible. Now we begin. Okay. So, I have a letter where sound stops flowing. The makhraj is completely closed. Now I have a letter like ya. Now try with me and say ya. Ay, 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 ay. Where does the sound come from? If I'm not blocking the makhraj, see? The makhraj here is still open. How is a sound created? Why is there a different effect if the makhraj does not close immediately? Do you understand my question? So, why does the simple movement upwards of the tongue change the sound? There's not as much airflow exiting. Yeah, but why the fact that I moved my tongue upwards, although it does not close it, change the sound? What? So I say a and then say ay. And somehow because I moved it up, even though it doesn't close the makhraj, the sound changed. Why? Because? Simple. Because of the pressure. So here, the turbulence of the air as it passes through the makhraj creates that noise. So when the letter goes through the makhraj, there's pressure that happens there. And that's why the sound comes about differently. So, and you notice it very well with ya. Do ya strongly. Ay, 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 ay. So, why is this important for softness? Because soft letters, they don't close the makhraj, but they change the sound of the letter. So, it is the complete flow of sound when it passes through the makhraj. So there is a complete flow of sound, but because it's passing through the makhraj, it's going through it, the sound is changing. Does that make sense? Again, this is not from the book. This stuff I learned from a couple places, but the book this is the definition of the book. The turbulence part is my own research. It's not from the reference book that I use. Okay? But point is that as you go through the makhraj, the sound changes. Another example is ha. Try ha. What do you feel? As the motion goes, when the sound goes up, there's turbulence that happens at that area that changes the sound. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So how is sounds created? They're created by the pressure of the makhraj coming close together. Okay? So, shid the letters. What does shid the letter do? Close the makhraj completely. And we need a way out. Soft letters, flow of sound. Sound just flows. Ay just keeps flowing. Jim, ad. Just close the makhraj. What do? I have to do qalqala. Aj. خلاص? Does that make sense? Is that clear or is that a lot of information? Is that clear? Yeah. Yeah, that's a mistake. Okay? So, we have yes or no. Does sound flow? If yes, it's softness. If no, it's shiddah. There's some guys in the middle. Okay? There's some guys in the middle. But these two pairs very clear? You have one where sound flows. You have another one where the makhraj gets closed and the sound does not flow. Okay? The partial flow of sound. What does that even mean? So when I try lam, for example, I say al. The sound seems to flow. Like when I say ay, it's the same as al, right? It's the same thing. So, what is the actual difference between the lam and the ya, for example? Yeah.
When you say lam, the air, your tongue closes here, so the air flows from the sides.
Exactly. So we're gonna go through each letter and gonna explain why is it actually different. So what's the difference between ya and what's the difference between lin Umar? Okay? But basically the ones in between, there's a partial flow of sound. Okay? So the noon and the meme. Why is a partial flow of sound in the noon and the meme? When I say an. Now, let's close the nose. Ad. Is there a flow of sound? Does sound flow? So I need the nose for the flow of sound. So there is a partial flow of sound where part of it, which is the tongue, closes the makhraj like shiddah, and the other part, the sound flows. And that's why you can say and. So there is a partial flow of sound. Does that make sense? So the noon closes the makhraj, the tongue part closes the makhraj, the nose part goes the makhraj. Same thing with meme. Try say meme. It closes the same way like qaf closes, right? It's the same thing. So I need a way to flow sound. Nose, nasalization. Sound from the nose is the way partial flow of sound happens, okay? So this is the example we had before. Look at the picture. The noon goes from the back and goes through the nose. That's how the sound from the nose come about. From the vocal cords, and it goes back. And we said if you want to remove your nasalization, this muscle goes back and closes the makhraj. Yeah, we talked about that quite a bit, okay? Lam and ra. Lam and ra a little weirder. Okay? We said that the letters go through the makhraj. Lam, it actually goes around the makhraj. You say L, the sound goes around. Now, try this, and I don't know if you can do it. Make your tongue as wide as possible and try to close the sides. Say L, 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 L. You'll notice that it actually closes completely. L, L. Try to make your tongue as wide as possible because it goes through the sides. So say L, L, O. So actually, the sound does not go through the makhraj. It actually goes around. It goes through the sides. So there is a partial flow of sound. There's a partial flow of sound. So you don't go through the makhraj, you go around the makhraj. And that's another property we're going to talk about. So try to make your tongue as wide as possible. L, 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 it's the same as Jim. It closes completely. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. The ra is similar. What did we say with the ra? With the ra, there's a small air. So if you close the ra, what happens? Why is there shuddering? Because the makhraj gets completely closed. And pressure happens, so it goes like this. So what did we say to stop takreer? Who remembers that? What did we say to stop takreer? Somebody else. Does anybody remember what did we say to stop takreer in the ra? Yeah. So you make a gap of air. So you say ar, ar. You don't roll your tongue back. You make a gap of air to keep the sound flowing. Ar, ar, ar. So again, there's a partial flow of sound, right? Because if the makhraj gets closed, first of all, that the sound, has to get completely congested into the small gap. Second of all, if you close the makhraj, then you have takreer because of the closing of the sound. Okay? So, the tip of the tongue intercepts most of the flow of sound, except for the gap created, creating a partial flow of sound. Okay? Ayn is similar. Ayn, try to say ayn. Ah, 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 ah. And it closes. In ha, for example, we said in ha, what happens? In the place of articulation, what did we say? In ha, this area goes here and does not close. In ayn, it closes. Ah. Actually, I'm pretty sure it fully closes. The idea is, ah, ah. So there's not a complete flow of sounds like ya, for example. Ay. There is ah, ah, ah. Ya'malun, ya'malun, ya'malun. You don't say ya. Don't say that. Say ya'malun. Okay? So there's a partial flow of air in the ayn. Okay? I believe the POA gets completely closed. I didn't find it in the book, but I believe it gets completely closed, okay? So I didn't find it in the book, but it looks like it gets completely closed, and that's how I recite it, okay? So, let's make a pause a little bit, and let's look back on what we have done, okay? So, let's look here. We have shidda, rakhawa, and in the middle. So, does sound flow? If yes, shidda. If no, rakhawa. Shidda, the makhraj gets closed completely. Up, up. The tongue closes the makhraj completely. The sound does not flow at all. Rakhawa, there is a flow of sound because the makhraj does not get completely closed. In bayniyah, there's a partial flow of sound. Does that make sense? Now, why is this useful? That's the question. So, any guesses? Why is this useful? What's the practical usage of this knowing, understanding this part? Any tries?
To recite better.
To recite, mashallah. Mashallah. So, for example, if I recite in front of you, say aj, aj, aj. So that's Jim, right? You know that's Jim. Question is Jim here in shiddah or is Jim in rakhawa? Okay, who says shiddah? Yeah, the question, is Jim shiddah or not? Okay, if yes, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, no? Who says no? So Jim, no? When we talked about the place of articulation, what did we say? Said the Jim is in the middle of the tongue and closes the makhraj. We say aj, 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 right? So it closes the makhraj. Anything that closes the makhraj is strength because the sound does not flow. Okay? So if I come to you and recite and say aj, 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 is this right or wrong? Huh? Wrong? Yes? Wrong? Why? Because sound? Because sound flows. When I say aj, sound is flowing. The jim is a letter that closes the makhraj. It should sound like aj, aj. Because the sound does not flow. Does that make sense? Yeah? So, one of the most important parts here is that's why properties are there. To distinguish between the mistakes when people are reciting. Right? So, when the letter should be closed, the makhraj should be completely closed, right? You should recognize that the sound does not flow at all. Okay? And that you need either qalqala or you need something else to bring it up, okay? Okay. Now, there is one more benefit about this distinction. Okay? When we recite the Quran, there's timings to each letter. So we say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. How much time do I stop at each letter? Do I say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim? Or do I say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim? Does letters have timing? Do we actually understand how to actually parse that? So, we have normal vowel letters, and we have letters that have sukoon. Vowel letters, they have the similar timing. Ra, ba, sa, da. They all have the same timing. You shouldn't say ja'a. You say ja'a, ja'alakum. So you don't spend much time. Each harakah should take the same amount of time. Right? What about letters that are sukoon? Letters that are sukoon actually have 3 levels. So, the longest time you should stop at a sukoon letter is a soft letter. Then the in-between, then the shiddah. So, when I recite and say, I'll write a verse, and let's try to do it. Alam nashrah laka sadrak. Okay? So, where is this? Okay. So, meme is sukoon right there. Okay, so I'll put sukun in every letter that has sukun. Mim, sheen, ha, dal, kaf. So, mim, is rakhawa sukun or strength? So, is mim in between, or is it a shidda letter, or is it a soft letter? Huh? Who says soft? Who says in between? Who says shidda? So mim is an in-between letter. Why? Because you close the mouth and the nose come about with the sound, okay? So mim. Now, sheen. Is it rakhawa? Who says rakhawa? Sheen. Is sheen a rakhawa letter? Rakhawa? Okay, is it in between? Is it shidda? So sheen is rakhawa. So now, and ha from me is also rakhawa. So now listen to me when I recite it, okay? Alam nashrah. So the meme is slow, the meme is quick. So meme is in between. Bismillah. Okay, so meme is in between. And this is soft and soft. So the soft ones I should spend more times on, and the in between I should spend a small amount on. So I say, Alam nashrah, Alam nashrah, Alam nashrah. So if I'm gonna recite this, I would say, Alam nashrah laka sadrak, Alam nashrah laka sadrak. So the meme here doesn't take as much time in sukoon as the sheen. Why? Because the sheen is a soft letter. Does that make sense? Yes? No? So, the dal and the kaf here, what letters are they? Are they rakhawa? They are shidda. So the amount of time that I'm going to give for them is very small. So I'm going to say, Alam nashrah laka sadrak. I give them a small amount of time. So timing is the difference between the three levels. If sound flows, then I give a lot of time. If sound partially flows, I'm going to give a slighter amount of time. And if letter does not flow at all, I'm going to give the smallest amount of time. Does that make sense? Yeah? Last thing I want to say about this section is timing is always relative. So what do we mean by that? If I'm going faster in qira'ah, everything is going to shrink, but relatively they're going to stay the same, right? So I'm going to say, so if I recite very slow, I'm going to say, Alam nashrah laka sadrak. So the duration, the three levels are going to stay the same, but everything gets elongated a little bit more. Does that make sense? So soft letters are always going to be longer than in between, and in between is always going to be longer than shidda letters. But it's going to take longer because my recitation is slower. So if I recite very quickly, Alam nashrah laka sadrak, the sheen and the ha takes a little longer than the meme, but it still has to take a lot longer than the meme. Question is, does anybody actually do this? I don't think so, right? But this is part of Tajweed. Giving sukoon their actual timing is part of Tajweed, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, let's do one more ayah from Surah Al-Sharh as well, and let's go through it. Okay. Okay, so the ayn is sukoon. So question is ayn a soft letter, in between letter, or a strength letter? Ayn. Who says soft? Who says in between? 3. Who doesn't say anything? Okay. So ayn, what did we say as ayn? The ayn closes the makhraj completely, so there's not a lot of flow of sound. So the ayn is in between. Okay? Now, Zain, is it soft? Is it in between? So who says soft? Okay, more people saying soft. Okay, who's saying in between? And nobody's saying shidda, obviously. Yeah? So, Z, Zain is a soft letter. And the kaf, like we said before, is a strength letter. So, soft and strength. So how am I going to recite it? Now focus on the ayn when I say it, and focus on the zain when I say it, okay? وَوَضَعْنَا عَنْكَ وِزْرَكَ وَوَضَعْنَا عَنْكَ وِزْرَكَ وَوَضَعْنَا عَنْكَ وِزْرَكَ. So the zain is taking much more time than the ayn. So sukoon letters that are in between have to always be faster than the soft letters. Does that make sense? So, timings of letters. We have voweled letters and we have non-voweled letters. Voweled are naturally all of the same at the same time. So ba, sa, ja, all of them are taking the same amount of time. The non-voweled, we have 3 levels. We have the soft, then we have the in-between, and then we have the shid. Okay? Okay. Let's go here. Okay. Now, this next property, so we finished does air flow, we finished the sound flow. The next one is, what is the direction of sound? But before we go there, we said, when we talked about the places of articulation, what did we say? We said that when the back of the tongue goes up, a letter becomes heavy. So when we said the difference between ta, dal, and ta, dal and ta were the same as ta. The difference was the ta, the back of the tongue goes up. We say to, to, to. So that heavy sound comes from where? The back of the tongue going up. So let's look at here. This is ra. When the back of the tongue goes up, it becomes ra, ra. When the back of tongue is down, it becomes ra, 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 ro, 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 ra, ra. All of this is because of what? The back of the tongue. So when the back of the tongue is elevated, heaviness come about. This is the next property we're going to talk about. Is there heaviness or not? Okay? So, let's talk about the back of the tongue a little bit because this is more practical. A lot of people either recite heavy all the time or they don't know how to make a heavy letter. So some people say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All the letters are heavy. Oh. So their back of the tongue is always going up. Some people, even the heavy letters, very weak. Khalid. Should be Khalid. They say Khalid, Khalid. Kha, Kha. They say فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوت, طَالُوت. Should be طَالُوت, طَالُوت. So what's the problem? The problem is the back of the tongue is not going up and down. So try to feel with me the back of tongue. So this is the practice I do, okay? I say, and then I move the back of the tongue as slowly. Okay? So the point of this practice is to feel the back of the tongue. So try to feel it. So if you feel the back of the tongue, what happens? You know which muscle to actually move to make a letter heavy. So say sa, and then say so, and feel the back of tongue going up. So. We said before that what you're trying to do is get my description and relate it to a certain feeling. So say sa, so. The back of the tongue goes up. And if you notice that muscle, right, you can practice that muscle over time. Most people, their muscles in the tongue is much weaker. So they cannot go all the way. They can't go all the way. You should be comfortable enough. Your muscles should be strong enough to actually stay there for a long period of time. You should say, and not give out. Some people say, their muscles give out. So the back of the tongue goes down. The back of the tongue should always stay up. And always try to feel the muscle. When you're learning about a technique or you're learning about a certain area, you have to always feel it and sense it. Tolut. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay? So actually what happens with heavy letters? The back of the tongue goes up. The sound hits the top of the dome and stays there and then goes out. Or not stays there, you hear an echo. So let's try ko. Make the back of the tongue go up. Ko. Do you feel any pressure on the dome? Do you feel any pressure in the upper palate? Ko. Do you feel any pressure there? This pressure is causing the letter to echo and go down as heavy. So some people defined, so there's a couple of definitions how people define this property. Some people defined it as the elevation of the back of the tongue. Just the back of the tongue goes up when you say this letter. So, to, your back of the tongue goes up. Some people said no, it's the movement of the sound to the top of the dome. Why do I take this definition rather than this one? Because the elevation of the back of the tongue is the reason this happens. So when the back of the tongue is elevated properly, the sound moves to the dome and heaviness happens. So the back of the tongue elevation happens. Ko, to. Then the movement of the sound happens. The sound elevates to the top of the dome, and then you get this sound. Oh, right? So, does that make sense? A small tidbit, you really can ignore this one, but this one is an example of a non-changing, non-essential property. Why is it not an essential? Because what is essential is this one. This is just a conclusion of what happens. This is actually part of the letter. This is just a conclusion of what the letter is. This is simply a technicality, right? Remember when we talked about this thing here? The non-essential but unchanging property, it's simply a technicality where any essential property, its conclusion is this. So what's essential property? Oh, the back of the tongue goes up. What is the conclusion? That sound. Oh, it's called heaviness. Oh, heaviness is here, the back of tongue is here. So simply a technicality, and that's why I don't want to go through this much. If you didn't understand this part, it doesn't matter. But I just wanted to show you that this is part of Tajweed. I just wanted to show you that, but it's simply a technicality. You don't need to really fully understand it, right? Okay, so what happens? Heavy letter, what happens? Back of the tongue goes up. The sound hits the dome. I get that sound. Okay, what's the opposite? Back of tongue goes down. sound immediately flows. It does not hit the dome. It just immediately flows. And I get a seen. Sa, sa, sa. Now, say seen. Do you feel any pressure in the top of the dome? Sa, 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 sa. Do you feel any pressure in the dome? Now say saw, 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 saw. Do you feel the echo in the top of the dome? Right? The back of tongue goes up and you feel the echo, the sound comes out with heaviness. Does that make sense? Okay, what are the letters of heaviness? خص ضغط قذ. These letters are always heavy. Always. Fatha, kasra, dhamma, sukoon, any place, anywhere, the back of tongue always goes up with them. Khalid, Talut, ولا الضالين ولا الضالين قالوا قالوا قالوا. So all of these letters are always heavy. The back of the tongue always goes up. Does that make sense? Okay? So, one more thing and I'll stop here. One more part and we'll stop here. Sometimes the ra is heavy. Sometimes the lam is heavy. Sometimes the alif is heavy. So the example I'm giving the whole time is Talut. The alif here, Ta, but the alif is not parts of these letters. They're not here. Right? So alif, lam, and ra have exceptions, where sometimes they are heavy and the back of the tongue goes up. When is alif heavy? If the letter before it is heavy. So Talut here, alif is here, the letter before. Is the letter before heavy or not? So what do I say? I say Talut. Another example is قالوا يراؤون. I don't fully know how to spell it, but I think it's that. يراؤون. So the alif is normally light, but before it is a ra that's heavy. So what do? I make the alif heavy. يراؤون الناس يراؤون الناس. Okay? Lam is only heavy in Allah. You don't say Allah, Allah. You say Al. What happens? The back of the tongue goes up. Always remember that. When anything is heavy, the back of the tongue goes up and you feel that pressure in the top of the mouth. Allah. Allahu nuru sama. Allahu. Allahu. You don't say Al. But, so, it's only heavy in the lafz al-jalala in Allah when it's preceded by fatha or dhamma. If it's kasra, you say Bismillahi. You don't say Bismillahi. You say Bismillahi. So if before it is kasra, the lam is light. It stays as normal. But if before it is fatha or dhamma, it's heavy. Allah, Allah. Okay? And the ra has a lot of details. We're going to have a lesson for it, explaining when the ra is heavy. The ra has a lot of details. So when the ra is heavy, there's exceptions, there's not exceptions, there's a whole thing. So we're going to explain the ra on another day. But these are the only exceptions of that are not elevated letters. They're not letters that the back of tongue goes up, but sometimes are heavy. Okay? Alif is heavy if the letter before it is heavy. Lam is heavy in Allah if the letter before it has fatha or dhamma. Okay? So let's make a quick review. Okay? So we finished 2 pairs today. We finished 2 questions today. The first question is, does sound flow? If the answer is yes, then it's soft. If the answer is no, then it's shiddah. I'll come back. Then it is shiddah. Okay? Shiddah, what happens with shiddah letters? The makhraj closes completely. Ad, aq, at. The letter gets completely closed. If there's flow of sound, the makhraj doesn't get completely closed. We said, if the makhraj gets completely closed, how do we figure it out? If it's ka and ta, we release air. If it's the other one, we do qalqala. Aqo, aj, ab. With kaf, we say ak. Ak, we close the makhraj first, like any strength letter. Ak. Okay? And then we have letters that flow. And then we talked about letters that have partial flow and gave an explanation. Here's the thing. This part, I spent a lot of time on. This is one of the harder parts. But it's not fully, you don't fully need to understand it, except in the fact that in between letters take shorter time when you make sukoon. That's it. You don't fully need to understand why it's partial flow. To be honest, that's part of completion. I just did it for completion, but I should have probably deleted it. But for completion's sake, I just explained why these letters are partial flow. But the idea here, especially with these letters, is that when it's sukoon, it takes a shorter amount of time than soft letters. That's it. That's the most important part. So we said timing, vowel letters have the same timing, sukoon letters have different timing. So, soft letters takes the long time. Nashrah, nashrah. The meme, okay, ووضعنا here. So, ووضعنا, ووضعنا. That's it. You don't say ووضعنا. No. ووضعنا عنك وز. So you give time to the zayn. Why? Because it's a soft letter. The ain, you don't give it time because it's an in-between letter. Make sense? So we say ووضعنا عنك وزرك. ووضعنا عنك وزرك. I gave a little longer time for the soft letter. Okay? So we have soft letter first, in between, and then we have strength letters. Last thing we talked about is heavy letters. What is heavy letters? Back of tongue goes up. Soft letters, back of tongue goes down. That's it. Nothing else. Back of tongue goes up, back of tongue goes down. Okay? And then we said alif, lam, ra. Sometimes they're heavy, sometimes they're not. And the alif is heavy if the letter before is heavy. Lam is heavy only in lafz al-jalala, Allah. Okay? Any questions? So we finished two properties only today. Does sound flow? Yes, soft. No, shiddah. In between, in between. This one. Is something heavy? Back of tongue goes up. Is it not heavy? Back of tongue does not go up. That's it. That's the whole lesson today. Okay? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك